Hi and welcome to the DE Physical Education Flip Learning videos. The respiratory system, structure of the lungs. The body needs a continuous supply of oxygen to produce energy. When we use oxygen to break down food to release energy, carbon dioxide is produced as a waste product and the body must remove this. Respiration, therefore, is taking in of oxygen and the removal of carbon dioxide. It includes the following: ventilation, getting air in and out of the lungs; external respiration, gaseous exchange between the lungs and the blood; transport of gases; internal respiration, the exchange of gases between the blood in the capillaries and the body cells; and cellular respiration, the metabolic reaction and the process that takes place in the cell to obtain energy from the fuel sources such as glucose. Review of the structure of the lungs. Air is a mixture of the gases and is drawn into the body through the nose. It passes through the pharynx and onto the larynx, and then down the trachea and into the right and left bronchus. Air moves through each bronchus and then subdivided into a secondary bronchi. These can get progressively thinner and branch into bronchioles and then respiratory bronchioles, which lead into the alveoli. The structure of the respiratory system. The nostril, the mouth, the pharynx, the larynx, the rib section, the right bronchus, the pleura, the fluid between the pleural membranes, the intercostal muscles, the muscular part of the diaphragm, the alveoli, the left lung, the esophagus, and the epiglottis. Remembering the passage of air. An easy way to remember it is using the following acronym: nearly lobbed the ball brilliantly again. So nose, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli. Nearly lobbed the ball brilliantly again. Key terms you should know. Diffusion. The movement of the gas molecules from an area of high concentration or partial pressure to an area of low concentration or partial pressure. Gaseous exchange. The movement of oxygen from the air in the blood and the carbon dioxide from the blood into the air. Alveoli. The alveoli are responsible for the exchange of gases between the lungs and the blood. This occurs via diffusion, which is the movement of gas molecules from an area of high partial pressure to an area of low partial pressure. The structure of the alveoli is designed to help gaseous exchange. Their walls are very thin, which means that they are a short diffusion pathway. This is because there are two layers of cell from the air in the alveoli to the blood. An extensive capillary network surrounds the alveoli so they have an excellent blood supply. They have a huge surface area because there are millions of alveoli in each lung, which allows for greater intake of oxygen. The structure of the alveoli. The bronchiole can be seen here, the alveoli at the bottom, and the capillaries surrounding the alveoli. From this diagram you can see gaseous exchange taking place. It goes from a high concentration to a low concentration, or a high partial pressure to a low partial pressure. The mechanism of breathing. It is important to remember that the air will always move from an area of high pressure to an area of low pressure via diffusion. The greater the difference in pressure, the faster the air will flow. This means that in order to get air into the lungs, the pressure needs to be higher in the lungs than in the atmosphere. Increasing the volume of the thoracic cavity will reduce the pressure of the air in the lungs. Decreasing the volume of the thoracic cavity will increase the pressure of the air in the lungs, forcing the air out. The contraction of muscles causes this pressure change. This can be seen in this graph below. The ventilation phase, inspiration. The muscles used during this are the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles, and the muscles during exercise are the diaphragm, the external intercostal muscles, the sternocleidomastoid, the scalenus, and the pectoralis major. During expiration, passive will be the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles. These then relax. Muscles used during exercise, the internal intercostal muscles and the abdominals. The mechanisms of breathing can be seen here. As the air is taken in, the ribcage moves upwards and outwards, and the diaphragm contracts and is pulled flat. When the air is forced out, the ribcage falls, the lung reduces, and the diaphragm relaxes, and the rise of the dome-shaped position. Lung volumes. This is the movement of the air in and out of the lungs. taking air into the lungs in the inspiration and moving air out in the expiration. At rest, we inspire and expire approximately 0.5 litres of air. The volume of air inspired or expired per minute is referred to as a minute ventilation and can be calculated by multiplying the number of breaths taken per minute by the tidal volume. This can be calculated in the following way. The number of breaths times the tidal volume equals minute ventilation. For example, 12 number of breaths times 0.5 litres of air equals 6 litres per minute. At rest, we still have the ability to breathe in and out more air than just tidal volume. This extra amount of air inspired is the inspiratory reserve volume, or IRV, and the amount expired is the expiratory reserve volume, ERV. More oxygen is required, so our depth of breathing increases. This means tidal volume increases because we are using more of an inspiratory reserve volume and expiratory reserve volume. To understand inspiratory reserve volume, try the following. Take a normal breath and hold it. Now take an additional breath until you feel your lungs filling full. This is your inspiratory reserve volume. To understand expiratory reserve volume, try the following. Breathe out normally and hold it. Now breathe out further as much as you can. This is your expiratory reserve volume. Key terms you should know. Tidal volume. Volume of air breathed in or out per breath. Inspiratory reserve volume. Volume of the air that can be forcibly inspired after a normal breath. Expiratory reserve volume. Volume of air that can be forcibly expired after a normal breath. And residual volume. The amount of air that remains in the lungs after maximum expiration. Residual volume. When we breathe out as hard as we can, there is still some air left in the lungs. This is called residual volume. Some air remains in the lungs after breathing because we can never totally empty our lungs, even when we have exhaled as much as possible. This is because there will still be some air in the alveoli, the bronchioles, and the trachea, as these are held open permanently by the rings of cartilage. This is broken down in the table below. The lung volume or capacity, for example, the tidal volume, the definition, and then the changes during exercise. So during exercise, the tidal volume increases, the inspiratory reserve volume decreases, expiratory reserve volume slightly decreases, our residual volume remains the same, and our minute ventilation has a big increase. These are all tested by using something called a spirometer. The volume of air we breathe in and out can be measured using this spirometer. With a spirometer, an individual breathes in and out of a sealed chamber through a mouthpiece, as shown in this diagram here. This makes the chamber inflate and deflate. As this happens, a pen recorder traces the breathing movements on a chart. You can see this bit here. The machine is calibrated so that the breath volumes can be calculated. An example of a spirometer trace readings can be seen here. As you can see, it measures your normal tidal volume, and then when you do your inspired reserve volume, it measures this in litres per volume or lung volume. Again, the same things will happen for our expiratory reserve volume. The graphic representation of tidal volume is slightly different. The lines are now longer and much closer together, which shows a deeper and quicker breathing. This can be seen below. The long peaks and troughs for the tidal volume mean that inspiratory reserve volume and expiratory reserve volumes are reduced. As you can see here, the change when the athlete starts exercising. The peaks and troughs become shorter as the breathing rate will increase. Key terms you should know. Spirometer, a device that is used to measure the volume of the air inspired and expired by the lungs. Minute ventilation. Minute ventilation is the volume of air inhaled or exhaled from the lungs per minute. Changes in minute ventilation occur during different types of exercise. As you would expect, the more demanding the physical activity, the more breathing increases to meet the extra oxygen demand. This can be seen below.